Welcome to Build Your Thing, the podcast where we help content creators find their unique creative voice, monetize their work, and build their tribe of loyal fans. I'm your host, Matt Jarrow, and if you have been struggling with bouncing back and forth between different projects and, having some hard time when it comes to focusing on one single thing, then today's episode may help. Because today, we are going to talk about ADHD. And Dylan Redekop joins me on this episode. So Dylan has been diagnosed with ADHD and, we're going to talk about how to manage that as a content creator. And if you have been following the show, you already know who Dylan is. So in a past episode, we talked about how to grow and monetize an email list. And with that being said, I couldn't be more excited to have Dylan back on the show. So Dylan, welcome back to Build Your Thing.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited to be back.
I mean, all the pleasure is on my side. And so on the last episode, we have been talking about growing your newsletter. And since then, you have been crushing it. So it's very inspiring, actually, to see you getting those great results. So I'm certainly very happy for you when it comes to that. But, today, let's just tackle another topic. Let's just tackle what happens behind the curtain, right? Let's just tackle everything related to shiny object syndrome and, having a hard time to focus on one single thing. So, yeah.
Yes, that's it is the curse of the internet, the blessing and the curse of the internet. And I think, it's really kind of, I think, exposed maybe a lot of people's ADHD tendencies to some degree. I know it has for me, for sure.
Yeah, so Dylan, you have been diagnosed with ADHD. It was like around 1 year, something like that?
Yep. Yeah, it was actually almost a year ago to the day. I think it was June 20th of last year. So I watched a few videos on YouTube. I was procrastinating and being distracted from doing my my actual work for the day, and I saw a suggestive video, and it was about living what a regular day is like living with ADHD. And I was like, I had kind of maybe contemplated maybe I had ADHD, but I thought, nah, I can get stuff done. I can focus when I need to, blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of wrote it off, but that suggested video showed up and I watched it, and it was it spoke a lot to me and, things I struggle with. And then I watched the next video from the same person, from the same channel. And it even more so was like, it was written. It was like the video was me writing it or producing it. Like I couldn't have related more to it. And I stopped watching the 8-minute video or however long it was, and I phoned my doctor and essentially made the appointment to kind of see if I could get diagnosed or if I could at least talk to him about it.
Okay. So what were the things that actually, resonated with you when you watched, let's say, this video about ADHD? Was it like, the issue to focus, or was it like, being distracted or not being able just to go through, let's say, a project or maybe a business or something else in the past? So what was the thing that really you told, this just hits the nail on its head?
Yeah, it was a video on motivation. And people probably don't often necessarily correlate ADHD with motivation, but really that is a big struggle for a lot of people who have ADHD. And it's not necessarily an intrinsic motivation factor. It's more of an extrinsic one. And what I mean by that is when there's something I'm interested in and want to do, I can easily get motivated to do it. For example, I love running. I love exercising. I have an intrinsic motivation to stay in shape and stay healthy. And so I do that. And I don't have issues motivating myself and staying motivated to do that. However, when I'm doing something that is not as enjoyable, that doesn't necessarily, I would say, appease my, intrinsic needs and desires, such as working a 9-to-5 job, doing tasks within that job, particularly if they are tasks that are dull, boring, monotonous, don't necessarily have a lot of accountability around them. Maybe they're ambiguous. Like the task is very ambiguous and there's not really, there's not a lot of clarity in the direction of what I'm supposed to do. That's where I really struggle to be motivated and to do those things unless I'm really being pressed for the result or for the end, the actual result of my work. So I one of the roles I've had in the past, several roles actually, there's been a lot of autonomy with the role. And so with a lot of autonomy, you have to really kind of push yourself. And I've really struggled to stay motivated with autonomy, which autonomy is great, but it's a double-edged sword, right? And so I could not have related more to this video, how it said, basically they used a metaphor about two people, one person who struggles with ADHD, another person who does not. And, they used a chasm, like a bridge kind of metaphor. And so to get from one side of a chasm to another, you need a bridge. And so motivation is that bridge to get you across. And people who don't necessarily struggle with ADHD can rely on the motivation to get them across. The extrinsic motivation of, this is for my job. I need to do this for my boss. I need to do this for the company. I need to do this even if I don't like it, and I will do it, kind of thing. And they can kind of get across that bridge. Whereas people with ADHD really struggle, and there's gaps in the bridge where they need a lot of support or guidance or some added I said support, but really added push to get across that bridge. And it's just a lot harder to motivate yourself and get yourself there. And so that was really the video that just basically spoke to me right to exactly what I was struggling with and what I was feeling with at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like, the thing is, like, I certainly have like some of those traits too, is like, or like on my side, is like, if I really don't want to do the thing, like I really don't see like the like the bigger picture, or I don't identify with the why, then like there is almost no way for me to do it. So
yes, exactly. If there's not a really clear, for me, it's essentially like an outcome that has a deadline with a repercussion for not meeting the deadline. I struggle. And I know that sounds like I maybe need to be micromanaged, and that's not necessarily the point. It's just that a lot of people are too polite these days, where they're like, oh, I need this thing done, but don't worry, don't rush, get it done when you have time. And which is nice and it's kind, but at the same time, it's not effective for me. I need a little bit more like, listen, I know you're busy, but I do need to get this done. You need to prioritize this higher than some of your other tasks. What else is on your plate, for example? And if I've struggled with prioritization, if I do, then they can support me by, talking me through it. And then they essentially say, we need to have this done by the end of the week. And, it's kind of like a no ifs, ands, or buts kind of thing. It needs to be done. And if it, barring it's a realistic deadline, is obviously, that matters too. But I just need to have those deadlines, because I've so often have been given tasks, jobs, projects, whatever it might be, with no clear deadline. And that's when I just put things off, because I'm not interested in completing it, because there's no urgency. There's no real actual clear deadline for when it needs to be done. So I just do things that I'd rather, enjoy doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, seems like that there is some link, like, between the motivation, between the procrastination, and like, also like really grasping or like identifying yourself with, like, with a bigger picture of any task that you have to do. So like, like, how are you actually feeling when like you have like these tasks, and you're just not able just to go through them, and then on the other side, you have like all those mountains of unfinished tasks, or things that you just started and never finished. Like how bad did you feel? Because, like, I mean,
oh, you feel terrible. At least I do. I mean, I've had to actually come to a point where I felt so awful about this. Right around the time I was diagnosed, I still felt really awful, even though I could kind of give myself the excuse of, well, it's, because my neurodiversity with ADHD. But at the same time, I felt awful. And now I've come to a place with a little bit of counseling and not really therapy, just some counseling sessions I've had with a professional counselor. I've been able to forgive myself more now than I did a year ago. A year ago, I'd beat myself up. I'd feel terrible that I wasn't giving my 110% to my job, that I
Mhm.
wasn't, going above and beyond, and really doing, way more than, the minimum asked amount of work. And maybe this sounds awful, but I've had to kind of just like sort of forgive and accept who I am, in terms of like, I I'm just not I'm not going to be the I guess the very eager intern who's wanting to do all of the tasks and go above and beyond and impress their manager and get everything and then some done. And I just that's not really in my makeup or my nature. I need to work differently, and I have different incentives. So with counseling, it's helped me essentially forgive myself, thinking I was a terrible employee, and just beating myself up over not necessarily finishing. Not I shouldn't say finishing, but not going above and beyond the call of duty in my day to day job. And so I've been told I'm doing a good job, and that my employers think I'm doing great. So I just need to forgive myself a little bit more, and I've gotten better at that.
People think, when it comes to like, let's just, put this into perspective of, creating and building your business, that, like, you just have to do how others are doing it. But like, you really, first you have to understand, like, the first thing is really you have to understand how you're wired, right? So once you understand how you're wired, and actually your strengths, and most importantly your
Hmm.
weaknesses, then you can actually just, um, like, it's the first thing. It's like, like navigating, let's say, the seas, or like, you just have to actually understand, like, the environment, and how you as a captain, are going to navigate through the seas, right? And like, really, you being like, when you don't know, like, how
Yeah.
you wired, and the things that actually suck at, and the things where you have, like, an quote unquote unfair advantage, this is, when you are going to actually make things happen, right? You just have to understand how you wired. So, like, did you actually, struggle with, like, maybe past projects, like, before starting your newsletter kind of, thing? Like, did you, start an online businesses, and
Mhm.
then you just see, well, this just leads
Oh
me
yeah.
nowhere? So you just start, let's say, you buy a course, or like, you're motivated for 1 month, 2 months, and then you see, oh no, this actually involves a lot of hustle, and, well, I just have to put in the work, but I'm not motivated anymore. I just found,
Yeah.
like, I just, understood how the thing is working, and now it's not interesting anymore. Let me just jump to something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much. So I'll give a few quick examples. About in 2010, I started. This is going a little ways back, but I started a blog because everybody was starting, WordPress blogs
Mhm.
back then, or Blogger, whatever it might have been. And so I was really interested in the local music scene here, where I live. And so there wasn't any really good music blogs on the scene, and so I thought, oh, I'll start up one. And so I did that, and I actually did that for about 3 years, and it was a passion project. But after about 2 years, it really was. I started losing interest in it. I was getting access to free shows, which was fun. But then, of course, the writing about the show started to be more of a it lost its excitement.
Mhm.
Let's say it lost
Yeah.
its luster. It wasn't as enjoyable. I didn't have as much excitement for it. So I did that for about 3 years. But after about 2 years, it started to really lose any interest, and I was not getting paid for it. I would get free CDs. Yes, CDs back then.
Mhm.
And I would get some free music concert tickets, which I think I got to see Coldplay for free, which was really cool
Mhm.
because I probably wouldn't have paid to see them, but stuff like that. So I got some perks, but really I wasn't earning an income from it. So it was also hard to justify the time spent doing it. Then a few years later, I also started another website. This is for anybody who's familiar with my stance on starting a newsletter versus starting a blog. This
Mhm.
is kind of where that comes from. Is I went through all the trouble of buying a domain and buying uh,
Setting up
hosting
WordPress,
with a
and
WordPress site. Yes, and the theme, and struggling with how it looked, and before I had hardly really any content, and then I started writing content for it, and it's just like by the time I started kind of publishing content, and tried to, promote it on social media poorly. I didn't do a great job of that either. And I just, by the time I had kind of done all that, I already was like, I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
I'm moving on to the next thing.
What's the next thing?
And so the next thing was woodworking business, so which I also started. So totally offline. This was all done by hand, and in a shop and everything like that. I did use social media again for that, but man, after 6 months, woodworking business, not making any money, real grind because it's a very local, very targeted local business. Unless you're shipping cutting boards or very small items, you have to focus local, and it was just hard, and I lost the joy in it. I turned a passion into a job, and that really kind of killed it for me. So that brings us kind of to where I am today with the Growth Currency newsletter. And the main reason, there's a few main reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm still doing it is because I haven't relied on it as an income. I haven't put that burden of it becoming a job. It's just continually been a passion, and I can see the income that I get from it as bonus income, and not like, oh shoot, I only made $500 this month. Instead, it's like, oh, I made an extra $500 this month. And so by having a full-time job still and being able to monetize this kind of passion project, that's one of the main reasons I've been able to stick with it. And then I also wrote a blog post and newsletter article about how I think this has also worked for me, because I think there's a lot of people who've pursued things that they have enjoyed and haven't necessarily quit their jobs to do, but have eventually lost interest in doing it. And so I went through kind of a few reasons why I feel like writing a newsletter and that forcing function of publishing weekly has really worked for my kind of ADHD brain.
Yeah, and like the interesting thing, because this was actually like my next question. How do you see the link between getting bored, or just wanting to jump to the next thing, and like actually linking this to the income part? So like all the projects, let's say that you started in the past, like do you think that even though, let's say, being able to make an income out of it would have changed the equation or not?
It's a good question. I think it could have, but it's really hard to say, right? I think if I would have made money with if I would have gotten over the WordPress blog issues and all that struggle, maybe I would have stuck with it, but I would have had to figure out a better way to monetize it. But I think the same with the woodworking. If I would have been able to figure out, if I had a bunch of people already asking me for a bunch of different projects, maybe I would have stuck with it. But at the same time, I was a one-person crew, and there was so much work involved for any piece that's bigger than a cutting board. Like if it's a table or a shelf or a bed or a whatever it might be, I think I would have burned out pretty fast. So with the newsletter, because it was something that I just kind of created on a whim, and was able to slowly monetize, and just like really start off with a very simple goal of just like publishing every week for a year straight, or even 100 editions straight. That was kind of my main goal, and not putting the pressure on myself to earn money. The other ones, if I would have started making money from them, looking back, I probably still would have been like, I don't think it would have stuck with it. But who knows?
Yeah, like I think really like the need of variety is quite important, and like if you really don't, like if you really don't find a way to actually to make it work, and let's say like I see that I have a lower boredom threshold when it comes to just repeating the same things again and again and again. So this is like when I just burn my wings, actually. So like an example that I give, like it was like recently, like at the beginning of the year, I would just start getting a lot of traction on Medium. So with my articles about note taking, and becoming a top writer, and then getting all this traction, like I don't have the exact numbers, but it was like I was able like to build a list from zero when it comes to actually note taking to 3,000 in just less than 3 months. And like I was just like I was creating this this free online course, and then I got all this traction, and then people buy my course, and then so what? Like, I was like, I have done like all the grind. I was replying, I like my inbox, like every day I got, I don't know, maybe 50 subscribers and people replying to the emails, and I have like maybe 700 conversation on Gmail, just with people replying to the emails, asking questions, and then and then okay, and then so what? Like, I just okay, I just found out what I wanted to find out, and I was able, just to pass on to the people who wanted actually to learn. And then, okay, what's the next thing? You see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It almost doesn't matter, right? It's like, and I'm honestly, Matt, I'm kind of impressed and surprised with myself that I have not jumped to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think about it, but nothing really. And again, I'm surprised. Nothing actually keeps my interest as much as talking about newsletters. I still find it really fascinating. There's so many new platforms coming out. There's so many ways to monetize, promote them, just to do them, and there's great content around them. I'm still very interested in it. And I'd say I'm even more interested in it now than I was 6 months ago. Part of that reason being, of course, I've niched down with my own newsletter to focus on newsletters. Very meta of me, but yeah, I'm very happy that hasn't happened, and I'm kind of nervous and waiting for the shoe to drop where I'm going to be like, oh, okay, like I'm kind of done talking about newsletters. But the benefit of that is that can branch off to a lot of different things. And if I've created a pretty loyal 1,000 true fans, or my own version of that, then those people will likely still follow me for kind of my brand and my personality. Yeah. And the value I've provided them in the past with any new direction I go. So I'm not too worried about it, but I'm also like really trying to ride this this interest and this excitement as long as I can.
That makes sense. So how do you actually get this variety when it comes to your project right now, which is like talking about newsletters? It is like like this is the first question. The second question, because I'm just afraid that I'm going to forget it, is like, how do you?
Yeah.
I forgot it. Okay, just answer the question and it will come back.
Okay. Did it have to do with monetization?
Yeah, no. Like the first question was, how do you actually? I forgot the question again. What was the question?
You're gonna say. How do
The
I?
first thing is about the variety. So how are you able actually to manage
Yes,
variety?
that's right.
Yeah.
So with variety, one thing I did, I think, that set myself up for success, sort of unintentionally, was I'm like, I need to have categories, newsletter, subject categories. And what I mean by that is, like, when you're building a newsletter, there's a few different stages that you're at, that you could be at, or that you will be at. So you need to start, you need to grow, so grow your audience. And then you need to improve your newsletter. So, like, you need to be optimizing it, improving your headlines, improving your copywriting abilities, improving your writing abilities. And you need to also, one thing I'm still working on is improving even just the look and feel of the newsletter, right? And then you also need to I shouldn't say you need to monetize, because obviously newsletters are multifunctional for different people. But in my case, that was another category that I wanted to talk about. So between those four buckets of start, grow, improve, and monetize a newsletter, there's just a ton of different topics you can talk about in each one of those, right? So, I was able to kind of suss out those four categories. And then now I feel like I've got a lot of different content that I haven't necessarily created yet, but that I can create now that I have those subcategories of newsletters, and where I can go from there. So that really has kept my interest, knowing that I have, a lot of runway for content and ideation as well to write about and to talk about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, while you were talking, like the question came back, and the question is like,
oh, good.
Do you think that not pushing too hard on yourself, telling you that, well, I have to say publish, or I have to write my newsletter, or let's say write a daily newsletter, and or something like that. Do you think that being able to give you this kind of empty space, may I say, to just tell you, okay, like, for me, writing a weekly newsletter is easy enough, and it doesn't put too much pressure on me. So, it, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, I think if I if I get what you're asking, I think you're asking if giving yourself permission to um,
kind of
like
permission
give yourself
doing less, right? So it's like not doing too much.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it's funny. One thing I wrote about in that article was how deadlines and that forcing function of writing a newsletter and telling people that I'm writing a weekly newsletter, and that I have sponsors now who, are paying me to publish a newsletter, actually has helped me stay consistent and really stick with this. And fortunately, it doesn't feel like a job. So that helps because I still enjoy doing it. But really, if I wasn't accountable to anybody
Mhm.
other than myself, I am really, really good at not being accountable to myself.
Yeah.
Like some people, they set a standard for themselves and they are able to very much uphold it. But I'm really good at giving myself excuses and, kind of letting myself down. And not all of us are, but that's just the way I am. And so being accountable to other people is way better for me. So, being accountable to an audience who's expecting a newsletter. I mean, if I didn't publish one week, would anybody notice? Maybe, but probably not. A sponsor who's paying me for that newsletter would probably. So there's that. If you don't have sponsors, you can not be too hard on yourself if you miss a week or you miss a day. I mean, if you're doing a daily newsletter, also like props to you. I don't know how you do that. It seems like something that's a prison I do not want to build
Mhm.
for myself. But yeah, weekly, I think, you give yourself permission if you need it, right? Like, don't be hard on yourself if you miss a week. At the same time, I feel as though I need that accountability to keep pushing through. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why the weekly newsletter has worked for me as, so far, almost 18 months in, I've stuck with it and I don't really feel like quitting or have any signs that I'm going to let up yet. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, great. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is actually, like you mentioned that you have been niching down, and this kind of like that niching down actually helped you to stay consistent, and which is
Mhm.
completely counterintuitive, because like one of the things that I'm afraid of is that when you niche down, it's like, okay, what if I'm just interested in talking about something else? Like, how do I actually, you
Yeah.
know, still y- y- like I
Yeah.
don't really know how to put it, but
I know what you're saying.
yeah,
How do you make it relevant to the topic that you've niched down to? Or,
exactly,
you don't want to be the kind of person who's like niche hopping. People do job hopping. You don't want to
yeah,
be like a niche hopper, right?
yeah,
Because then no one's going to take your next direction very seriously. So that's a good question. And I think, part of that for me, I was scared for a long time to niche down, and I had kind of thought about it, but I really hesitated to do it until I got a push from, a fellow community member in a online community that I'm a part of. And they said, when I think of you, I really think of like, I look at you as to what I should do with my newsletter. And so I think you are kind of like sort of the newsletter guy, even though you're not as big as a lot of the other bigger newsletter writers out there. But I think a lot of your content revolves around that. And I think you have a lot to say about it. And it's interesting hearing and learning about your journey with it. So, I took that to heart and I thought about it, and it felt so right that within less than a week, I had made the decision that I was going to, double down on it. But it took me probably about 14 months, I think,
hmm,
about till I made that decision. And I just wasn't comfortable niching down until then. I was, my quote unquote niche up until that point was the creator economy, which is not a niche.
yeah,
Like it's about as broad as you can get. So it really helped me when I did niche down, focus my know who I was speaking to. I knew the audience I was speaking to, at least the psychographic of the audience. These are people who are, trying to start and grow a newsletter. And so that helped with my messaging and my pitching to my newsletter. It helped me with sponsors saying, this is my audience. Like, they are in this phase and this is the kind of stuff they're interested in. So it really has helped in so many ways. The struggle is, of course, if you feel the pressure to niche down, and you're kind of looking at a niche that you're not sure about, and you don't think you could be that excited about writing about for more than a few editions or a few weeks or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
I would wait. I think I might hesitate to niche down a little bit and really just kind of explore what really interests you. And maybe you can write about something broad enough, like note taking. For example, Matt, note taking you can apply to so many different things, right? It's kind of a broad, yet it's kind of a broad topic, but it's also kind of specific too, right?
Yep.
You can apply note taking to school, education, when you're curating content, when you're creating content, when you're reading books, there's so much you can do with it. So I think if you can kind of have a meta niche, maybe, I don't know if that's a thing, but like kind of a meta niche that might help, where you can still talk about cool and interesting things, but your niche can be how to apply, that particular thing to these other topics.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing that I just realized with this is like, like the more market research that I've done, like, I mean, I talked to 700 plus people in the niche, so like I've got in
Wow.
terms of market research, like I've done a pretty solid job. So the thing is that I just understood that this is not like people who are just interested in note taking. I mean, it's just too broad, right? It's as you
Mm,
mentioned, like it's like niche down in a certain way, right? Like people who like to consume information, who would like to save it, and who want to retrieve it. But on the flip side, it's also very large because like everyone and their dog is actually taking notes, right? So the thing is that like
yeah.
what I really understood is that, well, what I want is actually note taking for, let's say, creative purposes, right? So like actually taking notes,
Yeah.
um, being able to really internalize the concept, make new connections, use noting as a marketing tool where actually you can just dump in different struggles your audience have, and then just start linking between the solutions and coming up with new solutions. So now it starts really getting interesting, and now is actually how I was able actually to shift from
Right.
just note taking to really take, let's say, an interest that I have, and actually broaden that and bring this to the content creator side. But on the flip side, I'm still the kind of guy who's still obsessed with, let's say, automation, who's still obsessed with working smarter and not having to click
Yeah.
500
Productivity.
different buttons when I have to schedule a newsletter, and I just wanted to do it with one click and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So well, it just seems that like I have like my big umbrella is actually productivity. And then, I just give myself the permission to just stop. Let's say today I want to talk about shiny object syndrome. Great. Tomorrow I want to talk about note taking.
Yeah.
Great. Let's say next week I want to talk about Zapier. Great. Like it's still
Yeah.
it's under one umbrella. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and I can relate to that for sure. I took there's a project called, I think, 100 Days of No Code, and I really love automation as well. And I'm a very amateur Zapier kind of automation nerd. I love the idea and the concept, and I've set up a few myself, but I definitely want to do more of that. And so I had considered starting a newsletter even on that topic. So who's to say that just because you read a newsletter about one niche doesn't mean you couldn't necessarily start one about another one, if and then follow that passion as well. So I can relate to not wanting to be constricted to one niche, but also you could think about how automation, Zapier, productivity can also be tied to your current niche. Like if I wanted to write about that stuff for newsletters, I could really tie in some no code products. I could tie in some automation. There's a lot when it comes to email marketing and newsletters that you can tie in with automation, like with sequences and everything. So there's definitely ways that you could, I think, even piggyback one niche on top of another to some degree.
Yeah, it's like, kind of there was like an interesting concept that I read a few days ago. It was like, this kind of niche stacking or audience stacking. I guess it was like audience stacking, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it's like,
Yep.
yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I think that's an interesting concept of audience stacking.
Yeah.
I think we're a little delayed. I think there's a bit of a delay there.
Yeah, no worries. So the thing is like, let's say, let's say, like you identify some, small mountains there where that you can climb it, that you can be the king, right? And well, what if actually they all the mountains actually serve the same purpose, right? So as I mentioned, let's say you could be, let's say, the number one guy for creators who want to start a newsletter. Well, and at the same time really think about, okay, what are like people who are just starting a newsletter also struggling with, and then build like something else around it. And as you mentioned,
Mhm.
may it be a separate newsletter or may it be the same, or you just have two issues, let's say, every week, and one issue tackling, let's say,
Yeah.
problem number one issue tackling number two. And well, if it's the same audience, well, then you're just building up on like the same asset, and kind of get the best of both worlds, where you're still following your curiosity, but at the same time still try to leverage the compound effect, and not just jumping from one thing to another. So today you talk about how to, I don't know, like about dogs, and tomorrow about cats, and after tomorrow about automation. Like there is like no
Yeah.
routine at all.
No, no, of course. Yeah, I think it's with ADHD, it's really about managing the like your interest and excitement levels, right?
Mhm.
And that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, perfect. And another point that I wanted to tackle is like, how do you deal with overwhelm? So I have a really hard time, especially like on social media. So I don't really use social media. Like the only thing that I do is actually, just reaching out to others. And, I mean, like, like our first interaction was on Twitter, right? But like, like all the
Mhm.
news feeds and all this stuff, I mean, it just, like, it just overheats my brain, so I'm really not able to manage that. So how do you manage that, and what is your take on that?
I don't manage it as good as I can. So do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. But I really do believe in setting time limits on stuff like that. So be intentional with your social media use. Like if you're going to go on Twitter, I think a good practice is to set a timer for say 10 or 15 minutes and respond to tweets. If a tweet comes to mind, tweet it out. But really, like I think the more you engage on Twitter, the more the Twitter tends to seem to improve your visibility for your own tweets as well. I found the algorithm has been beneficial in that way. So if you go in and engage and set a timer and do that for 15 minutes, then you're not like worried about, oh, I didn't go on Twitter today, I better go back, I better do this. You have a break in the day, oh, I better go see if I'm missing out on good content. If you just have that blocked time to do it, then you're not going to have that overwhelm and that anxiety about doing it. So I think I have done this in the past and it does work, but I struggle a little bit with that discipline. So I don't do it as much as I should have, and I definitely use Twitter as like the not necessarily procrastination, but like that dopamine, like this writing this article's tough. I'm just going to go check Twitter for now. You know what I mean? So I'm guilty of that, but that's one way you can manage some overwhelm with social media, and you can do that with whether it's I just wrote about curating content, right? Because there's so many newsletters that are really great that have great content. There's so many Twitter posts and threads that have great content. But if you can like batch these things when you go and try to find all of your curated content, then you're really going to save yourself again that anxiety, that overwhelm. So set aside 1 hour a week to go through all your newsletters and go through all maybe some of your favorite Twitter content and just save it for that block of time. Then you're not worried throughout the week. You're not distracted throughout the week of like, oh, I didn't read that email, or I have to keep it unopened so that I don't forget to go look at it. These are all things that you can do to help kind of manage some of that overwhelm, at least that I have found to do. Not as disciplined as I should, but that I have found that when you do them, they do work.
Yeah, so batching things, like maybe batching creating content or batching consuming content, is certainly like
Yeah.
an effective way to actually go through it. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Yes. So Dylan, so what actually changed after having diagnosed, and like as you told, like you have a little bit more forgiveness for yourself, but did you
Mhm.
like sometimes I think when you're able just to put, let's say, when you're able just to name something, it's just like way easier just to to embrace it, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I struggled with anxiety for about 20 years of my life.
Hmm.
Um, and, it's funny because I didn't really, from the time I was about, say, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old till I was about 27 or 28 years old. And, that was about 10 years ago. Uh, I'm 39 now. And so for about from about the age of 18 to 26, I had really bad anxiety. I didn't actually know. This sounds really ignorant, but I didn't know that it was anxiety.
Hmm.
And it took me having a panic attack, an anxiety attack. One of, I'd had them many times in the past, but I was I was tired of this always happening, and I didn't know why it was happening. I just all of a sudden felt like, short of breath and couldn't breathe. And I felt like I had to go and get fresh air and go take a walk. And this is in the middle of, like, brunch with friends, right? Like, it was a casual event and I'd still feel these feelings. And so one day this happened, like I said, at brunch. And I just said, I need to go step outside. I'm sorry. And I actually walked right over to the walk-in doctor's clinic. In here in Canada, we have, medical clinics where you can just walk in and see a doctor within relatively short notice. And so I did that, and I said, I don't know what's happening, but I think I might be having a panic attack. And then the doctor asked me some questions and essentially said, yes, you are. And so ever since I was able to name that anxiety, I have it's really actually helped me not be anxious. I just, whenever I kind of start feeling those feelings, I'm like, oh, it's just, you're just worried about being worried. And I'm not trying to dismiss anxiety, because it can be very, very hard to deal with and hard to manage. But for me, from my experience, it was much easier once I knew that that's what I was dealing with, to manage it. And so with ADHD, very similarly, I've been able to kind of acknowledge when I've been really struggling with maybe some self-loathing. Maybe is a bit too harsh of a term, but when I've not been as nice, kind to myself as I should be, and it's really helped me forgive myself in those times. And it's also helped me realize that I need things like accountability. I need things like deadlines and sort of, these harsher time constraints on projects to get them done, especially when it's not something I'm doing out of pleasure or enjoyment.
Hmm.
So it's been nothing but, beneficial for me to get the diagnosis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dylan, like anything that you want to add for people, like, who are listening to this and may identify with what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think a lot of, my biggest question was about medication when I first was diagnosed.
Hmm.
And I did try some, and everybody's going to react differently to various types of medication. Everybody's, ADHD, I guess, spectrum is a little bit different, right? And so my doctor put me on a very low dose, actually antidepressant. And not because I was depressed, but because, there's some science around how that could be beneficial for adults with ADHD. And so I tried it. He said, try it for 30 days. I did. Didn't feel any different. Then after 30 days, he checked in with me and he said, okay, if you don't feel different, try doubling the dose. And I doubled the dose, and it actually, like, within 2 days, I felt more of this kind of self-loathing, feeling really terrible about how bad of an employee I was, just feeling down,
Hmm.
kind of angry with myself,
Oh.
and worse than I'd ever felt. Not in a suicidal way, any of that, but I just felt really, really bad, really negative around myself. I had this terrible self-image, and I was like, I've never really felt this way before, and it seemed to line up very much with taking those,
Yeah.
doubling that dosage. And so I stopped. I didn't even go see my doctor. I just stopped the dosage entirely. And I haven't taken meds since. And I'm not saying that my ADHD has been, like, easy to navigate since then, but going to see a counselor has been highly beneficial for me.
Hmm.
It's not cheap. It's $150 a session, but, for the 3 or 4 sessions I've had, it's been way better than any medication I think could have helped me with. So I would just encourage people to, medication could be helpful, but talk therapy, like talking to somebody,
Hmm.
is also something that could really be beneficial as well. So I don't want people to think that, one might be better than the other. But for me, the talk therapy definitely was was very, very helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, maybe just, talking to someone, or maybe just, writing things down, that may help just to,
Yeah.
clear everything that you may have in your head. And, just because like we are not doctors, obviously, so you should not take our advice as, gospel or something like this. Everyone,
Right. Absolutely.
yeah. So it's just about, just because, let's say, you're diagnosed with ADHD, or you may have, some symptoms or some signs, doesn't really mean that that you need medication, right? It's just like that your brain functions in just a different way, and you may just have to
Hmm.
understand it, and you just may have just to deal with it, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and like I said earlier, everybody has, a different struggles with ADHD within kind of that spectrum. And I think I'm thankful that, my challenges are pretty manageable. Like if I'm being honest, I think there's people who have much more struggles with focus than I do, and things like that. So I'm grateful for, I suppose, the way I found out I have ADHD, how I'm able to manage it, and I think, yeah, just most of all, I'm just glad that I was able to, find out that diagnosis, and now understand how my brain works, and why I've, had, 8 different jobs in the last 4 years kind of thing. And forgive myself for even that, because that was a bit of a point of shame for me a little bit,
Yeah.
is just always, job hopping and losing interest in a job and wanting to find a new one. So now understanding why, and feeling, being able to forgive myself and understand better, has just been, so much more validating.
Yeah, I mean, and on the flip side, like you just were able to um, get more experience also, like with different jobs, like
Hmm.
different interests. And I think that there is like a strong relationship with between ADHD and also maybe being like a multi-potentialite, and Renaissance man, and
Yes.
all those concepts. So this is certainly something
Yeah.
that like everyone who's into that should actually experience. And yeah, like I know that I have a bunch of notes that I've taken around this topic. It was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't migrate them into my new note taking system, but it would certainly be interesting to
Mm.
actually see the relations and the connection between actually all those different concepts. Because if we really think about it, like there are like strong connection between motivation, perfectionism, procrastination, ADHD, uh, multi-potential, like being able to niche down, and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And it's really
Yeah.
all about understanding what how everything ties together, so that you can have like a uh, this will make actually your journey as a creator much more easier.
Yeah, I agree fully. There's something you said there that sparked a thought, and it kind of evaporated on me, but I'll just blame ADHD for that one.
like me during the episode with my questions. So no worries.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you very much, Dylan.
yeah.
Like any call to action, obviously your newsletter, but anything else you want to add before we wrap up this call?
Yeah, I want you to tell you what, I can't remember. Again, in classic ADHD fashion, I cannot remember the name of the YouTube channel. It's one of the most popular ADHD YouTube channels that I found, that helped me with my kind of discovery of this
Mhm.
and prompted me to get diagnosed. But I'll send those to you. So I would just maybe ask that you include those in the show notes for anybody else who may be related to what I was talking about with motivation and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Definitely check out that video. And then in terms of personally, I think following me on Twitter is the good, like, top of funnel experience with me. I'm just at Growth Currency on Twitter, and then growthcurrency.net is my website.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dylan. As usual, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And well, I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Matt. Same to you.
All right, so hope that you've enjoyed this episode with Dylan Redekop. And if you recognize yourself with some of the traits that we've mentioned today, then you know what? Leveling up your productivity skills is certainly one of the first things that you can do to actually manage being successful as a creator. And if you want to know more about that, well, then I have a daily email newsletter where I share a new productivity tip every day with you. So if this is something that you'd like to know more about, then check out the link in the description. And I'm also going to link to Dylan's work. He's certainly doing an amazing job too on his side. And well, thank you very much for tuning in today, and I hope to see you soon in a next episode.